Hello and welcome back to my garden. Today we're going to actually have nothing to do with the greenhouse, and I'm sure by now you figured out from the title what we will be doing today, and that is starting to dig up my dahlias. So let's head over there now and I'll talk more about it. Okay, so here we are in front of my dahlias. And this is part of the flower garden for those of you who are new to the channel, and I love dahlias, but this year I really messed up. I didn't take as good care of my dahlias as I should have. I didn't deadhead them as much. I didn't stake them as much as I should have. And quite frankly, the space was getting to be kind of a mess because of the way I laid out everything. And I thought to myself, why not just dig them all up this year? And I will replant them next year in a better organized fashion. The other reason I want to dig these dahlias up is because many of them have been in the ground for 2 to 3 years at least, and therefore their tubers, I'm sure, probably getting pretty large. Now, we haven't had our first frost yet. That's okay. You don't have to wait till your first frost to dig up your dahlias. You could dig them up sooner. In fact, many of mine look like they're just ugh. I'm going to go through and I'm going to start digging up my dahlias today, and I'll show you how I'm going to start processing them. We're not going to dig them all up, see what we got, what do the tubers look like, and then I'm going to start processing the tubers. The other reason I want to start doing this today is because I don't like washing my dahlias when the water is when it's so cold out. The water, makes my hands hurt. With all that being said, I'm going to throw on some gloves and let's start digging. So the first thing I'm going to do is look for this Bambino, because right here I had a Bambino dahlia and it was looking quite good most of the year. Unfortunately, with a couple of tropical storms, this area did get soaked. So I'm not, oh yeah, no, okay. I think I found it. Tubers are gone. My Bambino, I guess the ground itself got too wet. And that's one of the things I want to correct with this bed is I just want to add in a little bit more drainage into this bed so that when we do get tropical storms or torrential downpours during the winter time, the bed drains better. But I'm only finding bits and pieces of the tuber. That's sad, but that was Bambino. Now this next one here is Kelvin Floodlight, and this one has done quite well this year. It has survived the wars. I don't know if you guys can tell, but a lot of the flower buds are done. They're just shot. I'm going to take it back now. Let me get this stake out of here. Now, Kelvin Floodlight did flower for me this year. It flowered wonderfully. When I did my attempted rescue of the plant earlier this season, I did do a cut back on it and it did reflush and it came up nicely. So that was good. So I got a few more flowers out of it. Now let's see what this is going to look like. And I want to dig carefully because I don't want to rip tubers off of the main plant. If you grow dahlias, let me know in the comments below. And how do you guys treat your dahlias? Do you treat them as annuals? Do you leave them in the ground year round? Do you dig them up? There we go. All right. So this one is actually pretty nice. We'll take a closer look at this when we get back to the greenhouse maybe, and I wash this off. Quite a bit of new growth, new tubers on this, which is nice. There was an old tuber that had rotted off, which is fine. So I could probably divide this one, maybe, perhaps. We'll find out once I get it washed off. But for now, Kelvin Floodlight goes into a bucket. Now this one does have some growth on it, which is a plus, which means there's at least one tuber alive down there. Try to trim off some of these dead stalks. Pull that out. And yes, this is a cornel. A lot of weeds around the base here. Okay. It looks like it started putting on new growth from one of the tubers, one of the new tubers. I'm just going to take that off. What's this? We got another tuber here, possibly good. So it looks like the plants are basically dividing off on its own for various reasons. In fact, there's a whole nother plant right here. So let's go put this in a bucket. Now this dahlia is cutie patootie, and it did do some flowering, but unfortunately it had a very rough year like many of my dahlias. Right now it looks terrible. So what we're gonna do is do that. We're gonna get rid of the main stalk right there. The other problem with cutie patootie is it was infested with fire ants this year. And I put down fire ant killer about a week ago. So it looks pretty good right here. I just have, oh no, there's some fire ants. So you just gotta be careful. Let's see if we can get this out of the ground without getting, easy, gently. There we go, okay. There we go. Oh, and it's got a bunch of really good looking tubers on it. That's cutie patootie. We'll put that in a bucket. All right, well, I just filmed a whole little segment on me digging up a David Howard over there without hitting the record button. Terrible YouTuber. Fortunately, I have another David Howard right here. We're gonna take this David Howard out. In case you were wondering what the other David Howard looked like, it looked like this. So it was pretty good. And I got a brand new tuber. And this tuber is fairly new, but it has a little hole in it, so we'll see what this one looks like now. All right, this one's just breaking up in the ground because it was spreading out so much. But I have one little new tuber. These tubers look okay. They actually look pretty new now that I see them on the bottom. Quite a few new tubers here. Hopefully you guys will be able to see that. The whiter the tuber, the newer it is. And there's remnants of old dead tubers on here. And I just pulled this clump out and I have several smaller ones. Again, some new tubers here. So that's pretty exciting. Okay, let's go take this bucket and the others that I dug up and let's start processing them. I've seen different people process their dahlias differently, and I mentioned this in a video I've done probably a few times here on this channel. There's one gentleman over in the UK, Dahliaholic. I'll leave a link below. If you haven't checked out his channel, check out his channel. He has an extensive archive of videos of how he takes care of his dahlias. This guy has done it all with dahlias. Now, he's not an expert, but he's been doing it for over 20 years, maybe 30 years. So I recommend that if you've thought about growing dahlias, or even if you just want to see how somebody else treats their dahlias maybe differently than how you do, go check him out. Of course, there's Laura Garden Answer. There's a bunch of other different channels out there, I'm sure, how they take care of their dahlias and treat their dahlias. I think the one thing that a lot of people do is they just wash their dahlias off. If you've grown dahlias before, you understand. If you're new to growing dahlias, and if you haven't grown dahlias, you should. This is basically just so you could see what's underneath all the dirt. Now this was Kelvin Floodlight, and I could see right off the bat, and hopefully you guys can too, that a lot of these tubers are brand new because they're very white. Older tubers will be a dark brownish, and this had older tubers on it, but they rotted off and they fell off. That's a natural thing, which is fine. If you dig up your dahlias and you don't wash them and you store them unwashed, you could run the risk of overwintering a rotting tuber, which will then, that rot could spread to the other tubers and make them rot. You could overwinter a pest that you don't necessarily want. So it's been my experience that washing your tubers is definitely a good thing. So let me wash the rest of these tubers and then we'll move on to the next step. Now I put all my dahlias in buckets as I was digging them out for a couple of different reasons. One was just for keeping them separated because, again, I don't want to really mix up my dahlias. I like to keep Kelvin Floodlights with the Kelvin Floodlights and the Fuzzy Wuzzies with the Fuzzy Wuzzies and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the bucket turns out to be useful in washing the dahlias. But we're going to take Kelvin Floodlight now, and I'm just going to look this over. And it looks really good. I don't see any diseased, damaged, or... There are some tubers that are splitting, and I'll see if I can... It's going to be hard for you guys to see. Well, hopefully you can see that. Hopefully it's focusing. So there are some tubers that are splitting, and that was probably because an overabundance of water, again, from those tropical storms that rolled through late in the year. But I don't see any sort of rot from them. So they may have started splitting yet and then started hardening off. So what I'm going to do here is we're just going to first trim off the main stalk. Trim it back as close to the main plant as you can. And then what I like to do is take off all the roots. Try not to cut the tubers themselves, but you can trim the roots that come off of the tubers close to the plant. And then this gets to be the tricky part. Now, this is the part where some people will turn around and wait until next spring when the plant starts to reinvigorate or come out of dormancy. And you'll be able to see the eyes of the tuber. And I'll try to put up on the screen here what that looks like. And right now I'm looking at this one and I kind of think I see some eyes, but I'm not really sure and I'm not really certain. So what I think I'm going to do is I will store this Kelvin floodlight as is. It doesn't hurt to store it as is. And then, as I said, once it starts shooting up new sprouts, it'll be easier to see, or new buds, it'll be easier to see where those eyes exactly are, so then it's easier to divide the plant. Sometimes you could see them now and you could divide the plant now. It's not going to hurt anything. Or other times you just have to wait. I could also leave this as is and replant it next year as is. And all that'll happen is it may show up 2 or 3 new stalks. So it's not the end of the world. But before I put this in storage, really important thing to do is let this dry out. Because if I don't let this dry out and I put it away now, chances it'll get moldy, fungus, it'll wind up rotting in the box. So you got to let this dry out for a couple of days. All right, next up is, I have no idea which one this is. Here's my label. Cutie Patootie. Yeah, seriously, this is, if you've ever wanted to see some of the silliest plant names around, dahlias. I mean, I don't know if other plant varieties have such silly names, but dahlias definitely have, because there's so many different variations of dahlias, and people are constantly breeding new ones. So they come up with the strangest and weirdest names, like Cutie Patootie. So this one, you can see it was pushing up this brand new stalk. I'm going to see if I can gently break that off, because it doesn't need that. There we go. And then I'm going to cut back the main stalk. A lot of these tubers look really good. Just trim off these little roots here. Now this one I think I can divide, and I think I should divide now. So let me get a knife and we'll see if we can't do this close up. I don't know how well this is going to show up on video, but we're going to try to do a division here. All right, I spy with my little eye a couple of eyes, so we're just going to slowly and carefully. There we go. But I think I see a couple of eyes. So this should be viable for next year. I think I'm going to try to go right down the stalk. And I think I will stop there, because I think there are a couple more eyes here. But I don't want to take the chance of trying to do a further division and messing something up. So I might have, at one plant, I might have 4 Cutie Patooties next year. Maybe. We'll see. And again, just to keep things organized, I'm just going to put these into the seed tray to let them dry out for the next couple of days. You don't want them to be bone dry. You just want any excess moisture that may be in stems. So the stem stalks that we cut off, you can flip upside down, let any excess moisture drain out. This way they won't cause rotting or fungal issues inside. And you don't have to divide them after you wash them. You could wash them, let them sit for a couple of days, and then divide them. Like I said, you could even wait till next spring once the new eye buds, the new buds, so the new stems start showing up, and which again may be easier to do. So this one David Howard here. This one was, you could see, pretty massive and spreading out, but it had quite a few older tubers on here. So I'm going to get rid of that stalk. That'll be added to the compost pile. And I want to see if I can maybe do a division now, because I don't want to, part of the stalk here, the center stalk, is rotting. I want to get these new tubers away from the rot as much as possible. All right, just from that one that I was showing you, I got 5 divisions. Now here's a good example of a damaged tuber. Hopefully you guys can see that. The sort of the tear down here. I could take the chance of putting this in the box, but I don't think I will. simply because it could rot in the box, and if it starts rotting, it could wind up spreading to other tubers, and then you've just lost the entire box of tubers. But if you do divide them now, so you see where I've made these cuts, I want this to dry out, sort of like a potato. When you cut a potato and you just leave the half, it sort of gets a skin and it sort of seals up the wound, as it were. So I want this to dry out over the next couple of days, just to get that skin to, again, prevent any sort of fungal issues or mold or anything like that. So these two were just joined, and I was just going to put it away, but they wound up splitting apart. Now that's okay, because I think I see eyes on both of them. Again, it's hard to tell, I'm not all that good, but they have the main body, the neck, and then I see what looks like to be a couple of nubs, which hopefully will be new shoots for next year. So if these both survive, then I'll have 2 new plants for next year. So from the David Howard, I probably have at least a dozen plants. From the Cornell, I probably have maybe 6. And that's from, so the David Howard, there was 2 of them originally, so that's 6 each, and then the Cornell, probably 6 from 1 plant. Now, there's no guarantee that any of these tubers will survive the winter. But once they've dried out and scabbed over, the next thing you're going to do is box them up, crate them up, however you want to call it, put them in a bucket. You could use old compost, you can use perlite, you can use vermiculite, you can use newspapers, but essentially you want just to keep them the very slightest bit moist. Because what's going to happen is that they're going to dry, unless they're put into a humid place over the winter, a very humid location, they're going to start to dry out. The tubers are going to start to shrink down. And you don't want them to really do that. If they are slightly shrunken come the springtime when you pull them out of storage, you can rehydrate them. You put them in a bucket for like 24 to 48 hours, they will essentially rehydrate. If they're very shrunken down and dried out, you're done. They're no good. But you're going to want to keep them in a relatively moistish environment. Again, it's not moist is not the correct word, because if you've never grown dahlias before, you're going to think of moist as like moist soil. You don't want that. You want it to be a little drier than moist soil, but not dry soil. Kind of get what I'm saying there? If any of you have grown dahlias before and you have a better explanation, please leave those in the comments below. What I have done in the past, and what will do again, is have a spray bottle with some water in it, and then if I check them once a month. If you check on them and they look like they're starting to dry out, maybe just give them a spray with the spray bottle. Okay, you're not going to look to water them, you're just going to moisten them a little bit and then wrap them back up. You want to keep them in a dark, cool place. I toyed with the idea of putting all my dahlias here in the greenhouse, but right now my greenhouse is too warm, so I think the best location for them is going to be in the garage. So I'll pack them away in boxes, but I'll check on them once a month, and hopefully they'll all be fine come the springtime. And then the next challenge will be which tubers did actually have eyes on them that I didn't see. Let's say from the David Howard, where I think I have about a dozen. Theoretically, next spring, I should have a dozen new plants, but that doesn't mean that every division that I made today will have an eye on it. And if it doesn't have an eye, if it only has the body and a neck with no eye, no new stem will come up. So that's why I say it's kind of important that you have that eye. Again, I'm no expert on any of this. This has just been my experiences, and this is how I'm handling these things. I will leave links below as to a couple of channels where they probably explain it better than me. Or if you've ever grown dahlias before, please leave those comments below as to who's what, when, where, why, if you guys have any better suggestions or channels that you suggest other people go and watch to maybe get a clearer understanding of how to handle the dahlias. There's no guarantee that all these tubers will survive the winter, but hopefully most of them do. And as you saw, I have plenty of other dahlias to dig up out of the ground, which I'll do over the course of the next couple of weeks. And I will basically do the same process. Wash them, divide them if I can. If I can't, it's fine. Put them away into a box, store them in the garage. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, click that bell icon to be notified when I do post a new video. And this way you can follow along with whatever it is I'm doing next. I'm not going to show you guys me digging out the rest of the dahlia bed, but there's so many other projects that need to get done here around the garden. And again, I just keep going right on through the winter. So Again, hit that bell icon to be notified when I do post a new video, and this way you can decide whether you want to follow along as whatever it is I'm doing. I have flower beds to clean up. I have peanuts still to harvest. I have, oh, there's so much stuff. Sometimes I look around the garden and I start feeling overwhelmed. We might be getting our first freeze in the next couple of weeks. That, of course, will also impact what projects get done at what time. So, for instance, my cannas right now are rocking. They are just going gangbusters. They're doing well. They're flowering. But come the first frost, they're all going to die off. At which point I have to cut them all back, and I'm probably going to dig up quite a few of the clumps this year. Definitely one of the clumps, and try to remove those from the ground. And I'll bring you guys along for that project, because that's going to be a whole separate thing right there, digging up the cannas. And this is glad. Follow along, you'll see what happens. If you haven't checked out the links below, please check out all those links below. If you haven't taken advantage of that Epic Gardening sale, please head over to Epic Gardening, check it out. Up to 40% off on Birdie's beds and 20 and 30% off on a bunch of other stuff. Plus you can throw on my 5% on top of that. So it'll be 45% depending upon what you're getting for the Black Friday sale there. I think that's going to wrap it up for today. I'm going to catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.